Hello, my name is Jesse Ornelas. I'm doing my air sampling midterm project on polyfluoroalkyl air exposures. My agenda, so I'm going to detail what PFAS is, the processes involved with my workers, the risk description. I'm going to go over air sampling methods used and considered. Go over the results, recommendations from the sampling event that I had, the maintenance air sampling plan going forward. So polyfluorinated alkyl substances in drinking water well monitoring and air sampling. So recently the DoD and EPA partnered up and shared resources to jointly monitor and gradually remove PFAS from the U.S. Army's drinking water systems. In my scenario, Fort Murray State, Kentucky was picked by the U.S. Army to be the pilot installation to begin the well water monitoring event. As such, the installation commander, Colonel Stephen Marks, established a weekly working group to administer continuous town halls open to update key stakeholders both on and off the installation, consumers, and the public for what he coined the mission, Operation Deny Forever Chemicals. So for the air sampling event, standalone air samplers were placed in drinking water wells during the time personnel would be collecting water samples to try and capture air emissions of PFAS, with the two main types being PFOA and PFAS. So some details from PFAS. So it's extremely persistent due to being considered the strongest bond in organic chemistry. The two main PFAS, like I mentioned, were PFAS, PFOA, but there are over 50, maybe even 70 different strains of the PFAS chain. So the substances can be found in non-stick surfaces such as frying pans, food packaging material, Teflon, water-resistant clothing, military footwear, and cold weather parka gear, firefighting bunker gear, and just about everywhere, because a lot of stuff comes with plastic food packaging material, like I mentioned. It used to be called the C8, and the reason is because it has the 8 carbon chains as shown in the picture below. A couple of risks, according to on-the-job firefighting career exposures. So health effects for PFAS include decreased fertility and increased high blood pressure in pregnant women, increased risk in prostate, kidney, and testicular cancers, decreased antibiotic response to vaccines, low birth rate, developmental effects in children. Additionally, the firefighters are also exposed to PFAS through the AFFF foam that's used for fire suppression systems in big bay hangars for aircraft. So, process description that I had. So the main similar exposure group that I chose was the water treatment plant operators. So with that, they cover operations and maintenance for the systems. And within the process of the operations, they observe, troubleshoot, clean, and perform preventive maintenance on system instruments. They monitor chemical, electrical, pH, depth, flow, and capacity, level of storage of the water. Additionally, they come in contact with chemicals, so chlorine is a big disinfectant that's used in water treatment plants. Excuse me. Additionally, they can add fluoride for dental purposes in children and older and young adults for optimal water quality. Some hazards with this process are noise, thermal stress, confined space entries, chemical usage, and some controls that I had for this scenario. Noise, training, thermal stress, permanent required confined space, respiratory protection, PPE and wear, ear protection devices, and forecast meter. For the maintenance side, personnel conduct repair, maintenance on distribution lines. They often enter the wells and storage tanks to apply coatings, adhesives, and use power tools. And during PFAS sample collection and OTM 45 area air sample devices used within the well to be monitored for the sampling event. Again, the hazards and controls are eerily similar, with the exception of now OTM 45 area sampler is used to detect and quantify PFAS. So as of date, or to this date, there is no OSHA Pell or similar occupational exposure limit for PFAS. So I went with the two that were known in the U.S., the EPA, other test method 45 and 50 for air emissions. So OTM 45 is recommended target measurements of 50 specific semi-volatile and non-volatile polar PFAS chemicals through a stationary device. Its sample media is divided into a filter, primary XAD2, encapsulating like resin-based substance, impingers, and it uses LCMS to analyze the samples. It's very detailed and requires a lot of moving parts, and its calibration and pre-sampling procedures, it's very extensive. I'll show you a couple photos and you'll see exactly how extensive it is. OTM 50 so samples and analyzes volatile fluorinated compounds from stationary sources using Summa canisters essentially. So it measures up to 30 specific volatile fluorinated compounds. It is recommended for samples containing low moisture, so that's below 3% volume or acid content. And here's a device used for the OTM 45. Again, I think in the next you'll see the sampling train, so you'll see the intricacies of this massive device. And on the right is the LCMS. So here's the sampling train for it. Again, the number 3 item in green, the XAD, that's where the resin tube is, and it encapsulates the air that's emitted into the sample or driven into the sample, and then it regulates the temperature within that. And on the left of those big boxes, I guess if you want to call it that, is the Summa canister, and that's where it kind of regulates the flow on the meter on there. Again, a little more simpler, but I'll explain why I chose to use OTM 45. So assembly justifications and event timeline. So workers use EPA method 533 to sample the water. With that, the next thing that happened was unexplained elevated levels of PFAS occurred, suspected by uptick of 95 personnel. So they're trying to figure out why there was elevated levels of PFAS. With that, the installation commander hired 572 Delta engineering and environmental science officers that were deployed to Fort Murray to support efforts. So for those that don't know, 72 Deltas are the industrial hygiene entity of the Army. And the ESOs built a hypothesis that the added drinking water sampling footprint increased contamination spread. So they thought it'd be good to train the personnel that were monitoring with method 533 to correct the contamination procedures and implement OTM 45 for PFAS workers. Part of the sample details, so there's 7 water wells and the water treatment plant. Wells 3 to 7 were on Fort Murray real property, while the first 2 were off base. So again, some coordination piece to do for off base sampling for that. And well 4 was currently not in operation. So I had 4 teams. 3 of them were the same construct. It was 2 ESOs, 1 recorder, 1 cameraman, 2 sampling team to monitor in accordance with 533 and monitor wells. Again, EPA method 533 is a drinking water sampling method. So the ESOs use OTM 45 to sample the air emissions coming from that sampling event that was done in conjunction with EPA Method 533. And my Team Murray team was just the water treatment plant operator, a lead environmental science officer, assigned to monitor the plant using Method 533. Here were the sample results that I had for the event. So I had the water treatment plant was above PFAS, as well as well 2, and then well 6 I had above PFOA only, and had each monitor going for about 4 hours. And then with that, well 4 was not used because I mentioned it was inop. With my recommendation, I chose to continue monitoring sampling of the wells, the same wells, study the tape of the sampling event that was recorded to identify PFAS contamination, observe whether other PPE or direct reading instruments carry PFAS or other hazards, evaluate sampling orientation and placement for OTM 45 media, develop trend analysis, and determine any further hotspots of PFAS contamination outside of walls. So going forward, EPA 537.1 was the previous drinking water method used until 533 came along. 533 covers more short chains of fluorocarbons. So the DoD was using 537.1, which means now it has to implement method 533 for other installations and drinking water systems. With that, increased sampling and the lowered health advisory had to coincide with the EPA's final ruling. The result of that is going to be more sampling events to come, more exposure to PFAS for affected similar exposure groups, more remediation, more cost, more efforts, and more teams being deployed in support of these sampling events. While there is no NIOSH REL, ACGI HTLV, or OSHA-PEL, if an OEL is created or promulgated for PFAS, only adds more regulated actions for PFAS to follow. And I'm going to go back a bit because I want to bring up one point up. So I chose OTM 45 because OTM 50 is recommended for low moisture areas. So with being the drinking water well sampling, the chance of having low moisture are very slim. It's going to have high moisture because it comes in contact with water, and depending on the temperature and the ambient air or weather around, it's gonna significantly affect how OTM 50 data is justified and placed for future sampling events. I think that concludes. Yep, here's my references, and this concludes my presentations. Are there any questions?